Welcome to the Sincerely God podcast. I'm Sarah, and I believe that God is speaking to all of us all the time and in many different ways. The primary way that I listen is through two-way journaling. And on this podcast, I share excerpts from my journaling time with God, which are really inspirational messages spoken from the perspective of God to you. I'll talk more about what two-way journaling is and explore other methods which may be helpful for you to listen to God in your own unique way. I'm just an ordinary person who gets to hear from an extraordinary God, and I believe you can too. Thanks for joining. So today I am so excited. I have one of my super good friends, Nicki, on today, and we're going to talk about the primary way that she hears from God. But I just want to say, I am so grateful for you. She has been one of my biggest encouragers, supporters in life, but especially for this podcast. You know, when you're doing something like this, you're just putting it out into wherever, you don't know if anybody's even listening to what you're saying. And from the very beginning, Nicki has just always been there to be like, I can't wait for the next episode to come out. And so I'm just so grateful for you for that. And that makes me even more excited to have you on today. Yeah. So why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit, share a little bit about who you are.
All right. Well, I'm Nicki. I am married and I have 3 kids. They're young, so that kind of takes up a lot of who I am, I guess. I am starting my own business. It's called Think Pink. Currently, it's a bakery, but I'm trying to do coffee as well. So it's kind of becoming more, but it's all just through Instagram right now. So yeah, kind of just working on that. I am an artist as well. I think that's kind of a big part of who I am. It's just I love to create in general. So yeah, that's a little bit.
Yeah, you make amazing. I mean, just some of the cookies and amazing. So I will definitely put your Instagram tags in there so people can check you out.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so I love to be able to share, different ways that we can hear from God. I think God speaks in so many different unique ways, and I don't want people to be limited to just the ways that I'm comfortable with. And so that was one of the main things that I want to just hear from God in such beautiful ways. And it's been such an encouragement to me. So, maybe just share a little bit about what are kind of what you would say the primary ways that you tend to hear,
I know.
receive information from God. And just, you could even describe how that kind of progressed or just how it has been a part of your life.
Okay, yeah. So kind of an overall, he speaks to me a lot in visuals generally because I'm an artist. I feel like that's a big way that he speaks to me. So it's usually visual. I have occasionally heard a audible voice, but it's mostly visuals. So whether that's dreams, waking visions, but more recently and kind of throughout, it has mostly been visuals or visions that I've seen. So not necessarily dreaming, but waking life. I will get images. They kind of almost look like a movie playing. It's not usually like a still image. It's more of a moving image, and it'll play out a story. So that's impacted me a lot because first of all, I just think it's really beautiful that he speaks to me that way. It's very personal, it feels. But then also, it's helped a lot of people around me. And then it's helped me to kind of see his encouragement that he's giving me in the moment or information for the future. So, yeah, that's kind of the overview of how he speaks to me. But I used to be very anxious. I still have that. We're working on it. But that has probably been the biggest impact for me. Hearing his voice is just kind of calming that internal anxiety. And it's not necessarily that it's because he's giving me information for the future. It's more so that just knowing that he's there and listening and there to encourage me when I need it has helped a lot.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest impact personally that it's had.
It's huge. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I can relate that to my own life too, right? It's, a lot of times I can ask specific questions and get specific answers, but most of the time it's just that encouragement of like, I'm with you in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you say visuals, and there are different types of visions. So
Right.
just the way that I'll kind of describe is oftentimes I hear it described where you can have visions that are basically in your mind. So it's your mind's eye, or potentially you could call it like in your imagination. So you're seeing an image, but it's more like I tend to get words in my mind.
Okay, yeah.
And then this way of seeing visions in your mind would be like pictures in your mind. So like there's that way of seeing visions, but then there's also the way of seeing visions where you're seeing with your natural eyes. You know, just like I'm seeing my hand in front of me, you're seeing the vision, the
Right.
image that God is giving you, like with your natural eyes.
Right.
Would you say that you see it both ways, or what's the common, if you were to describe when you're kind of seeing a vision or an image that God is giving you, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it has started to turn into like that I'm actually seeing it in physically. It's not quite fully there yet, but I'm hoping to kind of lean into that. But currently, it's not even necessarily imagination, because I know that this is going to sound weird, but you can kind of picture where these things are happening, right?
Okay.
So when you're dreaming, you're accessing kind of the back of your mind to remember that dream. Even when you're imagining, like let's say you're listening to a song or something and images are playing in your mind related to the song, like it'll talk about, streams of water, and you're picturing water, right? You're kind of reacting to these words that someone's giving you to create an image in your head. That's kind of happening, at least for me, in the middle of my mind. Like it's not necessarily forefront, I guess. So when this is happening for me, it almost feels like it's the back of my eyes, not necessarily in the physical to where I could like say there's a picture screen in front of me, but it's still in my mind, I guess, but it's more at the forefront of my mind. It's not remembering or imagination. It's more the forefront of my mind. So that's kind of where it happens, I guess.
Okay, that's amazing, and that's why I want you on the episode, because I've never heard it described in that level of detail. I love that. So would you describe, you said you also have dreams, which I can relate to that. I get a lot of dreams where God is communicating to me through them. Where you're saying like you're seeing that kind of in the forefront of your mind, would you say that dreams, you tend to see them in that same place, or would you describe them as being like in a different part?
I would describe them as being a different part for me. Like I said, generally because I'm remembering, so it's accessing that different part of the brain. So yeah, I'm not seeing it in that same place. And I can describe a little bit more too when we talk about kind of my process, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, I would say they're two different places of the brain.
Yeah, no, that's
I'm
great.
not a scientist but that's just how it feels to me when I'm accessing that information.
I love that.
So
that's awesome. I think you're because I could describe, like I have seen visions from time to time, but just not very often. But I would never be able to describe it that way.
Okay, yeah.
So I love that. That's awesome. So how did it start, or like what's maybe the earliest that you recall getting an image in this way, and has it maybe changed over time? I know you said you're starting to see with your natural eyes as well, but even just that in your mind, has that even shifted over time?
Yeah, so I was trying to remember when it first started, and I honestly cannot remember the first time that I actually started experiencing that specific thing, but I do feel like things have morphed into that. So this is kind of where I've arrived. So I do remember as a kid, kind of like what I was describing with the songs, every piece of information I would get would be turned into an image for me in my mind. I remember that very vividly as a kid, like being in church and they're telling the story and I'm literally like playing it out in my mind, or with worship, playing out the words, even just, in school, like learning history, playing that out in my mind. So I feel like that was kind of him training me for that, I guess. But I feel like probably when I started noticing this the most it probably was about 2 years ago. I started really kind of diving back into my walk with God and pursuing Him with everything I had and pursuing how He talks to us. So that was when I kind of started noticing more of those ways. But I think it would have, if I had to say it started somewhere, it probably started with dreams, Him actually showing me how to interpret those and how to understand the imagery He was giving me in those. Again, I think it was more so of a way for Him to train me how to then understand the things that He was showing me in my waking life. So, and I think that that's going to turn into Him then being able to speak to me literally in the natural, and it'll be easier for me to understand what He's saying, to interpret what He's saying, and to be able to share it more easily. So I think it's kind of this ongoing process for me, but I can't pinpoint an exact time when it started. But I think that that's kind of the cool thing, is that He talks to us all so personally. And I can even remember back from childhood when He was starting this process. Even though I wasn't aware of it then, even though I wouldn't have accepted it during parts of my life, but I can recall times when He was doing that.
Yeah. Well, you touched on something that I definitely want to make sure we spend time on, is the interpretation. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can just walk through some examples of what a vision typically looks like. I know for dreams, my dreams are highly symbolic. Mm-hmm. Would you say visions are the same? Maybe give an example of what a symbol that you've noticed and that you've understood actually what the meaning was. Okay, yeah. So for my dreams, again, I agree. For me, they're very symbolic. A lot of times it takes a lot of digging to understand. Very, very metaphorical. With my visions, they're not quite as metaphorical, and I think that it's because He wants me to be able to share what I'm seeing, so He doesn't want it to take as much time. So kind of just a small example of something that He's done for someone else is when I was praying with them, I saw a quick image of them carrying a heavy load. Like, it's literally them, they've got like a backpack on, and it's got like cars and like houses and things that a person shouldn't be able to carry. So that was an image that I saw for someone specifically, and I was able to share with them and kind of help them understand what God was trying to tell me. But for myself, there are specific images and symbols that He repeats. So a big one for me, it's kind of silly, but He actually speaks to me a lot in like Disney language. So I love that.
It's really cute and very personal, and I just love that He does that because I love Disney. Like, I grew up with Disney, so it's cute that He does this. But I don't know if you remember in the movie Fantasia, and I think it was the 2000 version, the
I don't think I've seen
millennial version.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one.
So there's a cartoon where there's a green, like, little fairy kind of person. I would even describe her as like Mother Earth kind of a character. And she comes in and she's kind of touching the ground and these flowers are growing. And then at one point a fire destroys the forest that she's in. And you think that she died, but then she actually comes back to life, and then she starts to touch the ground again and the green comes back. So I had this vision one time where I was that green character, and it was Him and I holding hands, and we're floating over the entire earth, and we're touching down in certain areas and like making them come back to life. So that's kind of a repeated image for me, and repeated symbol for me is that come back to life. Another one I had was actually for our area, and I was driving one day and praying for my father-in-law, and I actually saw my father-in-law stand up, and he was saying, "Come alive, come alive." And then because of that, it was like a ripple effect. The entire city started to come alive, like stand up and come alive, like raised from the dead in a sense. So that's a big symbol for me. That's a big theme for me that He's speaking. So yeah, a lot of times it's like plants, greenery, water is a big one. Oh, there's another one. It was so cute. This one's super romantic. When I was a kid, I loved Prince Eric. And my sister and I would actually fight over who got to be his wife. And this one time I was praying, and he gave me this vision of I was Ariel and he was Prince Eric, and we're in this boat. And then he held my hand and we stepped out of the boat to walk onto the water. So again, like the Disney theme, he speaks to me a lot with that. But just because I like it, I think that's why he does. He knows that I will enjoy that image. So, yeah.
I love that. And that personal aspect of just, he knows us better than we know ourselves. And I mean, I think I've shared this before when I talked about dreams as a way of hearing that, there are a lot of books and things that talk about what different symbols can mean, or you can Google search online. And those are very, very helpful, but it's also personal to you. And so a symbol could have a particular meaning for you, but not for someone else. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's just something as maybe if this is something that you're exploring, or you're starting to recognize that God is maybe speaking to you in visions, look for those unique aspects of where he's connecting to you, right? He loves you for you and all those unique characteristics. So I love that especially I think even the back to childhood aspect, because I think that's something he's been talking to me more about recently as well, is just like that childlike faith and the childlike innocence and just like the fun and the things that come naturally as a child. So it's like almost bringing that fun and whimsy, even into your adulthood. So I love that.
That's so true.
That's so cool.
So true.
Okay. So you talked about one of the examples was you were praying for someone and you got this image of kind of the heavy weight that they were carrying. Do you tend to see that it's like when you're kind of, call it quiet in prayer, kind of asking, inviting God to speak to you, or will it just come randomly? Both?
Yeah, I would say it's mostly when I'm inviting him. There have been a few times where he's really trying to get my attention and he'll put that image up. That's very rare though. I think that's happened maybe twice. But it's usually when I'm spending time with him. I mean, part of that I think is my life is chaos right now. I've got 3 little kids. So it's hard to have those even mind moments to myself.
Right.
So I think that partially is why is that my life is just really busy right now. I do think that when I kind of quiet more, I do think that I will be able to experience that more just naturally, not necessarily if I'm like putting aside time for it. But right now I have to intentionally put aside time for it. So yeah, I will be praying, spending time with him, praying for someone. So yeah, it's a pretty intentional time right now.
Do you feel like that's because of that, right, busyness, where it's just you don't have the ability to direct your awareness? Like, could you potentially even be, let's say, communicating, but you don't notice because there's so much going on? Definitely. Or do you think there is this aspect of like he wants it to be this two-way conversation where he, like, just like if you're friends with somebody or somebody in your family, like you don't want to just like randomly interrupt them all the time. Like you want to have like this, let's sit and talk and have time together. Do you get a sense for that?
I do. So right now, because I have young kids, I've noticed that he will try to speak to me in real life. So like he'll give me symbols in real life. So it's not even a vision. It's literally that I'll see like 2 specific birds and then I'll kind of seek out that meaning. So I feel like that's him kind of adapting to my current situation, which I think is really beautiful, that he knows that, I'm a mom and I can't be like, you need to be quiet. I'm trying to like listen to God all the time. So you are not allowed to talk, So he knows that that's where I'm at right now. And so I think that he finds other ways too, to kind of interrupt that in my day. But again, I think it's a lot about noticing that. Mm-hmm. So I do think that he wants to be speaking kind of consistently, but he also knows that my attention gets pulled away quite a bit. So I do think that part of it is that I'm not able to pay attention as much as I would like to, but I do try to take those moments when I can to kind of focus on what he's telling me. And again, I feel like I'm kind of a child in this gifting as well. Like he's, walking me through and building upon what he's already taught me. So I do feel like in a sense that I'm kind of a baby at this. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of just holding my hand, walking me through it and giving me pieces as I'm able and as my life is able. So
you mentioned how like God is like you're a baby, you're new at it, and God is kind of leading you along and building on what you've learned. Has everything been, kind of like hands-on, what God is teaching you, and you're just kind of learning directly really from him? Or have there been other resources, whether books or, teaching series, whatever, that has been helpful for you as you've been kind of learning and exploring?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been a lot of resources. So I guess for me, that kind of restart to my walk with God, it ended up starting because I started reading my Bible again and got really interested in finding answers. So that's kind of how I would describe my walk with God in general, is that I'm constantly looking for more information. Like basically anywhere I can get my hands on information, I want more and more and more and more and more. But all the while, a lot of that is me and him personally. But there have been definitely some resources. I wouldn't even say that they're directly related to my visions. It's just more about understanding, I guess, other people's giftings and how God speaks with them, like that Blake Healy book that you shared with me, and understanding how he sees visions in real life. Even some of the like Timothy Keller books, just understanding kind of more of God's personality, Greg Boyd books. And again, like all of their books are very helpful. But for me, it's been a lot of just piecing information together from many different resources. But again, it's all in that kind of quest for information, just in general. So yeah, I definitely think that there's been a lot of outside help, but there's also been a lot of me and him.
Right.
So he is kind of taking me along that journey, but I would say too that he kind of directs even the resources that I'm looking into. So yeah, I would say it's very much me and him. I think I go back to that constantly because I don't want to stumble upon a resource that isn't helpful. So he kind of even directs that, like, maybe not this one yet. So he'll have me put it down and pick something else up. Like when I start to read a book, I'll be like, okay, is this what you want me to be reading? And then he'll tell me like, no, not yet. Or yes, this one's okay for now. So yeah, it's definitely me and him more consistently, but a lot of outside resources too.
So when you say he'll tell you, how would you describe that? Is it like you just getting this internal sense of like, this doesn't quite feel what I need right now? Is it a word thought in your mind where like those words are coming out of saying like, no, not this one? Is it an image? How would you actually describe that?
Yeah, so I would say it's mostly that internal feeling of like, this isn't what I need right now, or this isn't what you're trying to tell me right now. But even sometimes I will directly ask him, is this something you want me to be doing right now? And I've actually started hearing him speak more in my mind through your journaling processes. That's helped me a lot with that. So there have been times where it's him speaking like, no, I don't actually want you doing this right now. I want you doing this. So that happened to me recently I was reading in my Bible, and I was just I've been trying to read through it completely each year. And I was reading, I don't even remember. It was like Romans or something super random. And I was like, is this what you want me to be reading right now? And he's like, no, I want you to go to Acts. So he specifically said that he wanted me to read about healing and the people the masters of healing. So he wanted me to go back and read that. And then he had me go to David. So I asked him when I was done with Acts, okay, what do you want me to do now? And he said, okay, go to David. I want you to read the story of David. So there have been times where it's him just telling me. And that is a very interesting topic to try and explain that voice.
Right.
But you can tell the difference when it's your voice or when it's his voice, because I'm asking him. I don't have an idea in mind of where he's going to direct me. Because if it was my own mind, I'm going to read Romans. That's where I start reading. So I think for me, it's easy to tell when he's saying that because I didn't think that for myself. So there have been times when it's that. But I would say more so it's that just general feeling of this isn't sitting right with me. And it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's not for right now.
Right. Well, I love how you describe like that. So for me, when I first started, hearing the words in my mind, I didn't know if it was him, or really like, I second guessed so much of, well, I don't know, maybe I am making that up, right? Like somebody just talked about it, last week. So maybe I'm just remembering that. Like I would question every single thought. And so I love that you almost, and I've noticed this even just in your personality, right? We're friends. I've spent enough time with you that have this, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's like this ease in believing, or this confidence, or this like expectation that, like, instead of me, how I, like, especially before, I'm doing better at it now, but I would almost like question everything. My first response would always be like assuming the worst in a way. And I feel like your first response is always assuming the best.
I love that.
And I feel like that's been a process that God's been shifting in me, and I've come a long way, but that's absolutely something that I can see in you. And so I think that's when you describe like, oh, of course it sounds different, or it's different because I wouldn't have thought of that myself. It's like, you're assuming the best, you're assuming that God's moving. And I think that is probably, or at least an aspect of how much I think growth or acceleration you've even seen in your own learning, growing, leaning into all these ways that he's communicating with you, he's using you, moving in his gifts, etc. Is that like, you assume it's him. And I think that's something that we've lost a lot. I mean, there's probably a big aspect of it that is maybe just Western culture, right? We're very scientific based, and we kind of, I think, can have that tendency. But I do think it's something that I see in the church, right? In Christians overall, we've lost that again, back to that whole childlikeness, right? Like a child like almost always believes their parent, right? Of like, why would their parent, parents say all sorts of untruths to their children, right? But they believe it. I can think of some things that my mom told me that I still am like bitter about her having lied to me. But that, I guess it's an innocence, but I would love for us to get back to that as Christians, as, people who are leaning into God and what he's doing, how he's speaking to us, because honestly, I feel like that's a big difference that I've seen in my own kind of growth and walk is I feel like the other ways that aren't my primary method of maybe hearing or tuning in or kind of following what I feel like God is guiding me in, the growth that I've seen, or even what maybe another person would see when they're on the outside looking in and they're seeing like, wow, you've grown so much in X. Really, the way that I can describe it is it's not even that it's necessarily that the gift has grown or my ability to tune in. It's just my trust in it, right?
Yeah,
it's like, absolutely. If I feel like God is maybe speaking something to me, I'm getting thoughts in my mind. Perhaps if I'm praying with somebody or talking to somebody and to share it with them before, I'd be like, wait, let me get my journal. Let me I need like blocked out quiet time. So, cause I don't trust it. Yeah. But all of those words were still coming at that time. It's just now I'm more trusting it where I'm like, well, I'm just going to go with it. Yeah. And as I lean in, then it continues to flow and other people are seeing the fruit of it, but I'm like, it's always been there. It's just now I am getting more into that posture that you're in of that, like believing it's him, believing for the best. Like I wouldn't come up with that myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that.
I think so.
And then that aspect of just, we hear even you, right? You say like maybe your primary method or the often way that he speaks to you is in these visions, but you also get that internal knowing. You also get those thoughts in your mind. And so just, he's not limited, right? Like God wants to speak to you in so many different ways. And even what you said about it's helped as you've tried the two-way journaling to even be able to recognize without two-way journaling, being able to recognize kind of those word thoughts instead of picture thoughts that, you know, as you explore other methods, right? Maybe you have a primary method that you've just noticed this is the way that God is always speaking to you. But as you try or explore some of these other ways, then even new ways will appear, or you'll recognize new ways, or maybe it'll even hone or grow your primary way more. So I just encourage you, one, don't limit yourself, don't limit God, and then explore all of these different ways. And I know I can say that for myself, that especially as I've been able to hear other people, like you talked about the Blake Healy book, being able to recognize how other people receive and tune in, it helps me recognize it in my own ways for sure. So what would you say, like if somebody maybe they want to start receiving more in visions, or they think maybe they are, but they're not sure, you know, what's maybe some helpful ways that they can get started or explore more, or just things even to keep in mind? Because I know sometimes you talked about like some resources aren't what's best for you in that moment. What would you kind of say to somebody who wants to grow this way of receiving?
Yeah. First of all, I would say lean in. Like, I think that that's kind of the general idea with any way that God speaks to us, with anything that God's trying to tell us, is to lean into it. Like with my kind of vision gifting, I guess, adapting and changing right now, with it becoming more in the natural, I will notice it actually starts with light. It actually starts with a bunch of light. So it's happened in this room where the room will start to glow. So I used to be like, oh gosh, like just fix your eyes. Whereas now I'm like, okay, is that you trying to show me something? So I will lean into it and let it continue. I don't shut it down. So I would say, first of all, lean into it. If you feel like you're starting to get these, or if you're interested in these and in pursuing that way of speaking with God, lean into it. But I would also say fear is a big aspect in a lot of these things. You know, we're afraid that we're hearing him wrong. We're afraid that, are we even hearing him? Is it my own thoughts? So I would say to try and tackle that fear, to, I guess, put your mind at ease that if you are getting it wrong, he'll help you repair that. I think that was a big lesson for me, was, you know, if I'm speaking with someone about this specifically, I think that's probably the area where we get the most nervous, is when we're trying to share with people. When it's him and I, like one-on-one, it's less intimidating. There's less risk, I guess. So yeah, you could do it more one-on-one with him to practice in a sense. But I guess more often people get fearful when they're trying to share with someone.
Right.
So I would say just go into it knowing, if God shows me something, first of all, make sure that it's being said with love, that if it is a negative image, probably don't share that with someone, because God generally doesn't give us negativity. But if you're sharing something positive with someone, you can pretty much rest in the fact that that's probably him sharing that for a reason. But even if you get it wrong, I think that's where humility comes in, knowing that I can repair that damage after the fact. Don't just walk away and leave saying, oh, that was embarrassing, I got it wrong, I don't want to speak to them ever again because I got it wrong, you know. But if they're saying, yeah, that's not true for me, or that wasn't helpful, being able to say, okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to learn to hear from God, I'm sorry I got it wrong, but, you know, I'm here to encourage you, I'm here to help you. So if I'm hearing something, is it okay if I share with you, so that if it does resonate, then I know that I was hearing from him. So I think knowing that we always have that opportunity to repair afterwards. I think that that's the thing that I got so worked up about, is that if I got it wrong, oh, how embarrassing, oh my gosh, they're going to hate me, you know, whatever it was. So when it comes to sharing with other people, try and let go of that fear. Even when it comes to talking with God one-on-one, when you're spending that time with him alone, and you're potentially trying to lean into that and learn about that and hear more from him, don't let fear creep in. I think that's a big thing like you said about us as a church in general, we fear those things because they have had negative impact. But I think that the reason that they've had negative impact is because those people have said something, it was wrong, and then they run. They don't stick around to try and repair that.
Right.
So fear is a big one. Don't let fear creep in. Push it aside. Deal with it with God. Like, make sure that that was a big, probably one of my first steps with him was dealing with that anxiety, dealing with that fear. So make sure that you're working through that and not letting that creep in, because that will inhibit him speaking to you. If we're fearful of things and we shut him down because, I don't know if I'm hearing him right. He must not be speaking to me. I think that's what makes it take longer. So,
yeah. Well, the verse, perfect love casts out fear. That's the key is love, right? And so when you're talking about sharing with someone, like, let love be the ultimate goal, purpose. And so whatever you're sharing, make sure you're sharing with that as your motive.
absolutely.
And then, yes, even if you get it wrong, you're still loving the person. And, I think I had a version of that, right? When I was doing the 2-way journaling, God would give me messages to share with people. And I'm like, it's one thing when if I get it wrong for me, but to give it to somebody else. And I feel like God was very gracious in that, where the first, several whatever messages that he gave me were super generic, super positive, that was like, if I get it wrong, like, it's still nice.
Yeah, that's true.
And what I found, most of the time he was giving me messages to share with people at work and people that I didn't know what their faith background was.
Okay, yeah.
And I found that of all the people, I'm not sure how many messages I've shared. Let's just say 30 to 40 messages across different people, most of them at work. I think I got maybe one negative reaction from somebody. Even if they don't believe in God or have the same faith background, it's still nice to say, hey, I took time to think about you, to consider you. I'm stepping out to say these words to you, right? People still appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
And so even if it doesn't resonate, even if it we get it wrong, there's still love in that, because you're showing that you care for the person. So I would say just keep that in mind, right? And occasionally we might get something that is, kind of on the negative side, right? I think if you're newer to kind of recognizing God speaking to you in a particular way, whether it's through visions or something else, typically I don't think he's going to give you negative things because it's in that kind of training wheels time.
Yes.
Eventually you may get something that could be, considered negative to share with somebody. If that happens, I would definitely take more time to process it with God. I think often where there's been maybe hurt in the past, like prophetic within the church, is people will stop, right? They'll get that initial piece of information and it's negative. But if you keep going deeper with God, usually he's going to have something positive to say about it. If it's like, hey, I see this difficulty in your life, this blind area, this concern.
Yeah.
God isn't just going to shine a light on it.
Right.
He's also going to provide a next step, a solution, a way of love. And so I would say if you get something that is maybe, negative, sit on it for a bit, process with God. Make sure you're not just being shown it so you can pray into it. Make sure that you really are feeling like God wants you to share with the person. And typically he's going to give you more than just that negative thing.
Definitely.
And he's not going to do that to you right out of the bat.
Yeah,
you're going to have a lot of practice to be able to provide things that are clearly loving, clearly him speaking. And that way you can kind of build that, recognition of, okay, this is God, this is not. This is where I'm more confident, this is where I'm less confident. So
yeah, I definitely agree. I think I would make sure that you apply that to yourself as well. I think, when you're learning to talk with God and learning to communicate with God in that way, or in general in any way, I think, again, he doesn't he doesn't just leave us at the negative. I think he will warn us sometimes about something, but he doesn't just leave us there. So, for example, for a period of time, I was having these dreams about spiders and snakes, and it was making me very fearful. I would wake up and I would be super afraid. And I'm like, oh, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to communicate? Like, do I need to fight against this? And as I pressed into it, and I think that's part of it, in developing that discernment, but as I started talking to him more about it, he was showing me that he was not giving me those dreams. Wow. So I think definitely that's a big point to make, is that weigh it all against the things you know about God. God is goodness. God is love. He's not going to be sharing things with us to make us fearful or make someone else fearful. Mm-hmm. Even when he points out something negative, like you said, about something that they're getting wrong or something we're getting wrong or something that is a warning for us for the future that he's trying to get our attention on, he's not going to leave it there, like you said. So I think that that's a good way too to know if it's from him or not, is if it's just straight up negative, that's probably not from him. But there will be more of an encouragement or a solution past that we need to dig into. So yes, I definitely feel like we have to sort of develop that discernment in the things he's saying as well.
Yeah. And that's really good. So you touched on the fact that we can get thoughts, mm-hmm. images, things that are not from God. Mm-hmm. And, whether that is, depending on where you stand in how you view the world, like, I feel like our own minds can create its own negative, right? We've got enough negative downloaded to us throughout our entire lives that there's plenty of fodder there to use, or, having a negative spiritual influence. Mm-hmm. But it is true. And I'm still learning this, of being able to recognize that just because the feeling is inside, just because the thought is in my own mind, doesn't mean that it's me, mm-hmm. doesn't mean that it's from God. Yeah. And I still have a lot of learning, and God's been like just slowly piecing that out, because for me, it's like, well, if it's inside of me, of course it's me, right. But that's not true. Right. There's the verse that talks about like, take every thought captive, yes, because absolutely. Not every thought is you. Not every thought is God. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't want to, like, we're running out of time. I don't want to spend a bunch of time on that, but just keep that in mind, right? Just because an image comes, you see a vision, doesn't always mean that it's from God. And especially as you're kind of learning and growing, if it's negative, I think God will give you space that if you take an approach of like, hey, if it's negative, I'm not going to receive it, mm-hmm. and let God instead give you the positive. And as you develop that gift and you get more comfortable with it, to be able to recognize this is me, this is God, this is mm-hmm. neither, then I think he'll start expanding, yeah. and bringing in what could be, negative, but with that additional piece of like, and here's the solution, or here's what I want to say about it.
Yeah, definitely.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to share?
I think just encouragement that, we kind of hit on this too, that God speaks to us so personally. So I guess just be open to the fact that it could be even something that no one else has experienced. Yeah. So, but I think he does it in a way that would make sense to us. Like, for example, for me, those visions make so much sense to me because I am so visual. I'm creative. I really, even my learning style, that's how I learn. Like, I learn through visuals. You've got to give it to me. Do it in front of me. Like, that's how I learn best. So I think that is beautiful that he speaks to me that way, because it's so personal. So I think be open to things of your personality, things that you love, that those could be ways that God's speaking to you.
Yeah, I love that. Well, take a look at her Think Pink Instagram and start exploring. Maybe this is a way that God wants to start bringing your awareness to how he's communicating to you. So thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sincerely God podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you'd like more information, you can go to my website, sincerelygod.com. There you'll find links to my social media, as well as an ability to get your own copy of Sincerely God, a collection of quotes, either the book or the prayer journal. Until next time, keep listening to how God is speaking to you.
It's all inside you, waiting to be